welcome back to the Always Reading Book Club. It is your girl Kiki Reader, and we're going to do a standalone today. Now, this is a part of a series, which is called The Elite Doms of Washington. It's by Elizabeth Safleur, but we're only going to do one of the books because, again, they all can be done as standalones, and this week's book is called Perfect. We meet Isabella Santos, and she is back in Arlington, Virginia for the first time in about 11 months. So she's been in Miami, and she has come back to Arlington to the home that she shared with her husband. Now, her husband's name is Jorge. He is no longer alive. She has to go through the house. She sees the sheets everywhere, and it's really surreal for her. And we find out that she had this like really beautiful garden because she's a landscape designer, but she works with she was working with her father in Miami, his landscaping company. And it's a little heartbreaking to see how bad the garden now looks, right? But again, how else is it going to look if no one's been there? And then we have no idea, what was going on before Jorge died. So, yeah, it's going to look pretty rough. So she walks into a spider web and freaks out because she hates him. She hears someone yell, and it is Marcos. Now, Marcos is the brother of Jorge. And she winds up falling. He, of course, helps her up. And we find out that he had gotten an alert from the security company, thus the reason he was over there. We get a little backdrop, and we find out that after the funeral, Marcos kissed Isabella, and his nickname for her is Ella, and she has not returned any of his phone calls at all these past 11 months. We also find out that Marcos actually came to Miami, but her father was like, oh no, you can't see her, and never told her about it. So she, of course, is like, she's going to have a conversation with her father, So Marco apologizes for kissing her. He's like, I know it wasn't the right time, X, Y, and Z. So we find out that she actually met the brothers together. Originally, Marcos is who she wanted, but that's the pull she had. It was towards him. But Marcos scared her because he would go off, and when he would come back, he'd have bruises and things like that, and no one knew what he did. And so Jorge would call him Rambo and stuff like that, And so he was just so secretive. And so Jorge seemed more like the better choice, and she felt like he understood her. Even though it was all kind of a lie, He apparently had a really addictive personality. He was addicted to drugs, and then when he got clean, he got addicted to extreme sports. You name it, he was doing it. Now, we don't know how he died just yet, but we can clearly see there were massive issues going on. So I'm like, okay, this should be fun. So then they hear a noise, and they go inside the house, and they hear a noise, and she's like, it's probably just the furnace. So Marcos goes down. He's going to go check and see what's going on. And we also find out that those disappearing acts that he used to do, he doesn't do that anymore because he doesn't work for the same people. Again, we don't know what he was doing, but I'm excited to find out. We switch to Marco's POV. I love when they do that. And so we find out that he was always crazy about Isabella. And he does understand the reason why she chose Jorge, because he was always gone and Jorge was a constant. So he realizes why he lost out on her. We find out that when he goes downstairs, he goes into the basement. There's all types of artillery. There's guns, there's C4. Like, someone is preparing for an army down there. None of the stuff is locked up. it's not safe. It's just like, what the hell was this guy into? So he found a box of something. He's like, he'll look through that later. He takes it upstairs, and asks her if it's okay for him to take it. She says, you can take whatever. She looks tired. She looks worn down, and she didn't think this was going to have as much of an effect as it was. And I'm like, well, she kind of should have, because that's why she was so reluctant to come back. You know what I mean? Like, if you felt like you could have done this with no problems, you would have been came back and handled everything. But you knew it was going to be difficult, you know? So he, of course, is like, you can come and stay with me, because she was staying at a hotel. He's like, no, you stay with me. You know, we're family. You should come. And so, of course, she decides to go with him. He made her dinner, and he made a comment. Well, in his head, he made a comment of how Jorge, didn't deserve to be her master. So I'm like, okay, so clearly they're into the whole dominant submissive thing, which we already know when the title of the series is called The Doms of Washington. So he makes her dinner, and she didn't want to go to Alexander's house, which is a BDSM club. I think it's called Ascendos, and she's just not ready to go there just yet. Maybe just, too many memories. While she's taking a shower, he's cooking, and he comes up with an idea to try and keep her there. So he figures, you know what? How about I have her do some landscape design for my yard, and then that way she'll stay a little bit longer. So she likes the manual part of landscaping, and that's her fun thing, to get down in the dirt. She loves it. And so he's like, okay, this could work. She'll consider staying just a little bit longer. And so he tells her the plan. She, of course, is like, you can hire someone to do that. He's like, but I want the best, and that's you. And he also, so eventually she says, okay, he did notice that she seems about maybe 20 pounds smaller than the last time he saw her. But if you stressing, you got bags under your eyes, that means you're probably not sleeping well. Like, yeah, I'm sure she's not eating too much. So he had made some stuffed peppers, and so he was very much like, I'm gonna have to, get some meat back on her. So she eats, they, have some back and forth talking, and she tells him, she always felt safe with him. And clearly, both of them got feelings, right? Clearly, there's something there, because they have an effect on one another. It seems like it's been that way from the beginning, but a choice had to be made, and she made it. And it clearly probably wasn't the best choice. And she says that, I guess, Jorge kind of bombarded her with attention and stuff like that. And to me, that always kind of feels like, what is, I understand people can really like you and want you to know they really like you. But then also, people use it as a manipulation. They like to love bomb you, to get you to fall for them. But he's got clearly even more secrets, because I don't think Isabella knows anything about what was in that basement. Clearly, she didn't know anything. So it's, good grief, Jorge, what all did you do? He also checked that box that he took, and it was a bunch of loans. So he's like, he's gonna take care of it. He's gonna have his friend Derek look into it to see what all needs to be paid, and they'll just kind of work it from there. Marco wakes up from a nightmare. He had a dream that he'd gone down to the basement, and he saw Jorge hanging from the rafters in a pool of blood. And so it's really quiet. It's too quiet. And so he gets up, goes and checks the guest room on Ella. She's not there. He starts to freak out a little bit. He heard a noise in the kitchen. He grabs a knife. Ella's in there. She freaked out because he was freaked out. She was gonna make breakfast. She was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't ask permission." She was about to say permission, but she stopped herself. So we, clearly see that submissive nature in her, you know, very much still there. And so she asked him if he wanted pancakes or waffles. He said, why not both? So she made them while he went upstairs, took a shower. When he comes back down, she says that um, she wanted to go to Jorge's grave. It was coming up on a year. He got kind of upset because he felt like, why would you want to do that? Like, he was awful to you. He didn't treat you good. And she's like, it wasn't always like that. He's like, but that's not okay. And he should have made it right with you, and he never did before he fell off that mountain. So apparently he died doing some extreme sports stuff. So he told her, I'll go with you. And she was like, thank you. Um, it would have been difficult for her to go by herself. So she did feel like she needed his support. And he still hasn't found the courage, our boy Marcos, to tell her what the hell he found down in that damn basement. He wants to get like some more information before he kind of tells her. She's already fragile, and I guess he kind of feels like, I don't I don't want to freak her out even more. Because again, you got to remember, he's trying to keep her around, and if it becomes too much, she's gonna bolt, she's gonna run, and he's trying to prevent that. They went for a walk, and she talks about the different ideas that she had for a part back in Miami that they were commissioned to do. And she calls the client Santiago, his first name. And of course, this pulls a look from Marcos, like, you're on a first name basis with this person. And she's like, he is my dad's client. Like, come on, he's Poppy's client is what she said. So this is when she, talks about how much fun she had just being in the dirt, just being the landscaper, and how her mother wanted her to take up the landscape design because her mother wanted her to go to school, be in an office, and all that type of stuff. But she loves being right in the dirt. And so she says to him, like, what if I put tulips everywhere? And he's like, you don't like tulips. You like rare orchids and birds of paradise. And I say, oh, honey, if he knows the exact type of flower you like, oh, that's a love. He knows her. Oh, for sure. There are truths that come out between them as they're having this conversation. He used to work for a place called Guardian Security, and he did black ops. So he was special ops. That's why. And after that, he didn't go into any more detail. Like, pretty much, that's all he really needed to say. And he said, like, the last op went really bad. People died. And so that was his last one. He's done with it. And she just kind of tells him, whenever you want to talk, I always listen. She had made some type of statement, and he basically just kind of let her know that I don't just think of you, like, you're implanted into my mind, you know? Like, you're buried there, period. So then he kisses her. She loves it. This time she doesn't slap him. So a year ago when it happened, well, 11 months, I guess, ago, when it happened, she loved the kiss, but she felt like it shouldn't have happened at that time, and that's why she slapped him. But she had spent this whole year thinking about it. And so again, I think just the guilt, he had just died, is too soon, but you've been harboring these feelings, these emotions all this time, clearly. You know what I mean? Marcos was always concerned about her. He would check in on her just to make sure, like, but this just seems like a very torturous life, right? Like, your brother married to the woman and you just pining away for her. I don't know, that just seems like a lot. um but a biker comes by, and then the thunder starts to roll, And he, of course, is like, we better get out of here. So Marcus looks down at his phone and he sees he's got a bunch of messages. And he had basically put his phone away and had been putting all of his attention towards Isabella. And so there's a slew of messages from Charlotte. So Charlotte is a submissive who was married to one of his really good friends named Daniel. And he was a comrade of his in their black ops world. And so he got killed in the last mission, and he's just kind of taking over being her master. Now, he doesn't fuck her, but she still needs certain things like being demanded to do stuff. She still needs that. And again, some people have different needs, you know, and she is clearly one of those types of people. He knows he should have gotten her a new dom by now, but with everything going on with Isabella coming around, his focus is just been laser on her. So anyway, he gets out to the club, Ascendos, and she's there. She's been crying and stuff, and we find out she had a freak out because she went to listen to her husband's last message, and it was the voice message, and she couldn't find it, and so she freaked out. And he's like, "We can get that back for you. It's okay." And then she likes to hear the story of when he died, because when he died, he apparently was thinking about her, and she's afraid if she doesn't hear the story, she's going to forget it. So it's like, it's a torturous thing that she does to herself, but at the same time, it's something she feels she needs because she never wants to forget her husband. I was like, oh, that's so sad. I'm not sure how long ago, well, I wonder if it was just like a year or so ago. It couldn't have been that terribly long ago that she lost her husband, if I'm not mistaken. So he calls a guy named Mr. M. Oh, no. Mr. R. I think it's Mr. R. And he's a master, and he's been looking for a submissive. And Marco thinks, okay, this will be really good for her. So they go into the library, and the guy asked her if she was into fire, and she said she'd always wanted to try. So they go into the library because that's the only place where they can do certain types of things, and using fire can only be done there. And so that's where they're going to go. He's like, he's there, but he's not. Because he can't really give his full attention to anything but Isabella, you know? So Isabella had gone to lunch with her friend Yvette, and he feels like, he was the one she should have married from the beginning, and there shouldn't have been any other husband. And so he's very much in the mindset of, I am getting Isabella. Like, this is going to happen. Isabella comes to Ascendos, and she's like, you need to see your friends and things like that. So they go and they talk with Alexander, who owns this home. It's like 5 stories high in Georgetown. It's like a masterpiece. It really is. Well, she also did his outside garden. She designed it for him, and so he wanted to show her how he had kept it up. He did not let it fall to the wayside. And so they're having a conversation, and Alexander is very blunt. Okay, like, he just says what it is. He doesn't really do the whole hinting around thing. And the estate, he's the executor of it, I guess. Some kind of way Jorge did that. And he did tell her at the end of their conversation, like, we're going to need to go over with that. She wanted to set up a formal appointment. He said, fine. He's like, but you can come anytime, and we can go over it. But we'll put something on the books, just to make you feel comfortable. And Alexander was very blatant with her and says, the man's been in love with you this whole time, right? Like, that. And she, of course, was like, I know. And made a comment about him, she said, he's always had my heart. And she said it so fast because he's always been there. And so Alexander says, okay, but yet you chose Jorge. So then he kind of let her know that, listen, Marcos had a really hard time as well after Jorge died, and he gave up his career, what he was doing with the Black Ops. He felt like if he couldn't save his own brother, how can he save somebody else? And then Alexander kind of said to her, he might need you more than you need him, you know? And so they go to the library, and Isabella sees the scene. So even though Marcos is like sitting back in the chair, he's clearly master, and she sees the other master that's, interacting with the woman, but it's of course starts to make her compare herself to Charlotte. Charlotte's a redhead. She starts having this jealousy because why is, this woman calling Marcos master, right? And so at the same time, she's been very afraid of like fire and things like that, but yet she is being very aroused by what she is seeing here. You know, it's getting to her, it's turning her on. And Alexander is kind of like, just to let you know, like, it's kind of like if you take a cotton swab and put some fire over it, you know, it's basically that's how it feels. Like she's not being tortured or in pain or anything like that. Like that's not happening. Um we find out that she hadn't had anyone in a really long time. So even before Jorge died, they weren't fucking, you know? And so they had stopped coming to the club for a long time, and she did miss the place, you know? This was her scene. This is what she liked. And it became too much watching the scene, and she ran out. And so then Alexander knows Marcos is he's gonna leave, right? And so he did something he'd never done in over 35 years, which is step in and take over the scene. And so that allowed Marcos to leave, because Marcos was leaving anyway, because he saw, you know, Isabella run. He's going after her. Um, but before he let him go, Alexander did tell him, you know, we'll talk, but you need to go, go get Isabella. And he's told him she's in the garden, go get her. She runs deep into the garden, and she's kind of having like this talk with God, like, am I being punished? Can I move on? All these types of things. This regret about choosing Jorge when she met them 10 years ago. And when Marcos came in, because he came in after Jorge, she thought they were twins. And Jorge seemed to really dislike that comment. And then he came at her with so much attention, it overwhelmed her. And she, of course, regrets the decision she made now. So then, of course, Marcos finds her. She has this little spot where she kind of made this thing in her head like, if he finds me in this spot, then I'm not going to hold back anymore, And he found her, so she fell to her knees and she didn't hold back, and she was honest with him. And she said, it should have been you. It always should have been you. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? And he, of course, was like, there's nothing to forgive. He said, you can make the choice now. And she said, I want you and only you. And so he told her, basically, then that's what it's going to be. But he was like, come on, let's go. But she wasn't ready to quite leave the garden yet. He gives her this extremely passionate kiss. And he's already hard. She's just ready to be fucked, but he won't take his dick out. So what he does is pretty much let her rub herself against him until she climaxes. And then he wanted to make it all special and shit, but he just couldn't take it anymore. So he winds up eating her pussy. She comes, and then he slams into her with one thrust. He didn't last too long because he couldn't wait to mark her and feel her. And so they lay there, and he was just like, it's you and me together. And she did ask him about Charlotte, like basically, what's up? And he said it's never been anything sexual. It's more like a fatherly type of a situation. She's the wife of an old friend, deceased friend, and that's it. And he let her know, it's you and me. We are together. There's no one else. And for the first time everything felt very right to her. So the next morning, she's gotten a lot of calls from her parents, and she has not been answering. She hears, no, he hears Marcos a set of like 3 foot set of feet coming up his walkway, and he of course takes out the gun because he's like he's ready to like take him out, you know. And so it's her parents and her brother. So the father is really rude to him. He thinks it's because him and Jorge look alike, you know. And so I think when the father sees him, he sees Jorge, and that's the guy that hurt his daughter. And so they were like, we went to your house and you weren't there. And the mother was like, they came to help her because they knew it was the anniversary of Jorge's death and they wanted to be there for her and all this type of stuff. And the father's like, you're traveling with us, you know, you're going with us to the cemetery. And Isabella's like, you know, we were going to go, you know, me and Marcos. And honey, the dad was just like, fine, he can come, but you're riding with, you know, your mom and myself and your brother. So he calls him, I think his last name is Sandoval. Yeah, Marcos Sandoval. And he clearly, listen, he treats her like a little girl, Isabella, but at the same time, when is she going to stand up for herself, you know, at all? You know, so it's like, being that she does have a submissive nature, I kind of see why she's allowing her father to kind of dictate to her what's going to be done. But if you don't like what the fuck going on, at some point, you're going to have to stand up, you know? Especially if the decision is to be with Marcos and that shit ain't changing. You're going to have to hold fast to that. And you're going to have to be able to tell your dad, like, this is happening, you know? But it's a strange, kind of a strange dynamic. But at the same time, she's going to have to buckle up. They get to the cemetery. It took Vittoro, which is the name of Isabella's father. It took him a long ass time to get there because he didn't want to follow Marcos. So Marcos was like, you know what? Yeah, let his ass use GPS. So anyway, they get there. A lot of emotions going on for both him and Isabella. They did a little prayer. Alexander showed up. His different friends came. They knew it was going to be pretty rough for him with her parents being in town, and they didn't want him to be outnumbered. And I just thought that was just super sweet for them to come and have his back. So afterwards, Vittoro is like, you know, she's coming back with us, and Marcos felt like if she went with them back to the hotel, they were going to try and take her straight to Dulles Airport. And he was trying to make sure that didn't happen. So they have a little standoff. Her dad went off on Marcos, and he's like, you know, one Sandoval is enough. He's like, I'm not going to let you do this again to her, Jorge. And then everyone looks at him because it's like, this is not Jorge. So again, he looks like Jorge, which means he represents the pain, right? And he can't separate the two. So then Alexander comes over and he's like, you know, this is not the place to make a scene. They agreed reluctantly, you know, Vittoro as well. Isabella told Marcos, I'm with you. You know, I'm going to go with them for a moment, but I am with you. I'm not staying with them, you know. And so Marcos tells her, you have 1 hour, and whether you're done or not, I'm coming to get you. In his mind, he is just like, he is not going to lose Isabella again. So Marcos goes to a gym, hit the punching bag with one of his friends. I think Derek was there, as well as Jonathan, who I want to say is a former congressman, and I think he's a lawyer or a former lawyer. Yeah, he's pretty connected as well. So they're there, and they were just kind of like, you want to kill someone, we could tell. they were like, you want Isabella, go and get her, you know. And he had decided enough was enough. Hadn't even been a goddamn hour. He called her. She answered on the first ring. He was like, I'm coming to get you. And one of his friends had said, she's waiting for you to do something, you know. And damn it, sure enough, she was waiting by that phone. So then we switched to Isabella's POV. And she's with her parents and her brother. Her brother's trying to, how do I say it? So her parents, of course, are trying to get her to come back, right? To Miami. And the brother isn't doing that, but he kind of puts on in front of the parents so he doesn't seem like he's going against them. It's like, you little ass. They all grown and they it's something. They still terrified, right? But the mom is like, you know, she wants her to, you know, at least just stay with them a little bit longer. And she's like, we just need more time together. And her mom is like, you know, you don't have to leave, like you can come back and all this type of stuff. But Isabella ain't leaving. Like, you can tell her commitment to Marcos is so incredibly strong. It's like that girl is not going anywhere. Like, Marcos really is her life. And I think the fact that she went so long without him, I think she is doing what I want her to do, which is kind of like, okay, toughen up, decide what you want, and stand on that shit, you know? I think she's getting to that point because now what it feels like is the parents are trying to take her away from Marcos. And the same way Marcos is like, I'm not losing her again, I think she feels the same way. I'm not losing Marcos again. Her parents go upstairs to rest, and then her brother Jose comes up to her and he's like, you're not coming back with us, are you? And she's like, no, I'm not. She's like, and I'm not ready to, you know? And the brother was like, well, I'll just tell him that you called a cab. Because he already knew. He's like, Marco's on his way to get you, isn't he? He's like, I'll cover for you. And I thought that was sweet, you know? So then Marcos gets there, his Range Rover. She gets in and she hikes up her skirt. He starts playing with her. But he never touches her clit. So she's trying to like move to get him to touch it. And he's like, don't chase the pleasure. So eventually they drive. I mean, they drive and drive and drive. He's taking like a super long way home while he's playing with her. And then right at the end, he taps her clit. She absolutely loses it. And she had asked if she could come earlier, and he had told her no. So I'm like, oh shit, you already know punishment coming. They get to the house, and he tells her, you got to get punished for that, right? So when they get in the house, they have a whole conversation about the whole master, submissive thing. And whenever they're alone, when she comes home, he wants her to strip naked and to be on her knees. And so that's what she does. And then she gets her punishment, which is like a ruler that he smacks on her ass. And then she winds up sucking him off, and he tells her to play with herself while she sucks him off. And she just got lost in it. And he could also tell that she was trying to kind of make him lose control too. And he pulled her hair painfully to let her know that he was the one that was in control. And in her mind, she was like, yes, this is my master and all that type of stuff. Again, this is not for everyone, right? This is really for those of whom you truly view life this way. You truly need this, because everybody can't, this is not for everyone. It really isn't. But if you like it, you do you, boo, but see, to me, I like the idea of you getting lost in the moment, right? I don't want to be the only one who get lost and you can't. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't find that fair. But again, there's a different type of dynamic. And again, if this works for you, it works for you, And this, for some reason, works for her. Because the minute he did that, her mind went, oh, he is my master. Like, it went there. It didn't go, well, damn. Her mind went somewhere else. So Isabella's parents have decided they're going to stay another week. So you already know they're trying to stay as long as they can to try and convince her to come back to Miami. So Marcos, Derek, and Jonathan, they're all over to Isabella's house to get the ammunition out that he found. And so Derek had did some digging around and found like a lot of different loan notes uh, that were in there. They had been paid though, except for one with a guy named Waylon in Baltimore. Now this guy apparently is facing like racketeering, wire fraud, all kind of different charges. So that could be why he hasn't quite come yet to collect on his debt. So the guys go down, see all this stuff, C4's in there, everything. They load it up and they're going to take it back to Marco's place because he has a place, a secret room where basically he can put the stuff and he doesn't have to worry about it. So Derek left because he had a date. Jonathan stayed, and he was a little rattled with touching the guns because apparently he had been shot before on the street, and so he doesn't really like touching those type of things. But for him, he did it, but it did rattle him a little bit. But he also is the one that tries to get Marcos to open up to talk about things, and Marco is just like shutting it down. Like he's not in the mood to talk about anything. But he tells Marco, he can tell Marco is very much still furious with Jorge. And he's holding on to the anger. And he's like, you need to let go of that. And he's like, when it comes to Isabella, listen, she's not going anywhere. She wants to be with you. You know? She's there. And so Jonathan also invited him to like this charity event on Friday. He's like, you guys can come to this. It'll get you out the house. She'll be able to get dressed up. It'll be really nice. So Christy is like Christiana. I can't pronounce it's something like that. She does different fashion consulting from both, professional high end events to um, more sexual attire, right? So Marcos is thinking, you know what? If she can have one of those sexy outfits underneath like a beautiful gown, that'll be a dream. So we switch back to Isabella. She's talking to her father. Her mother's like, and she tells them that she's staying. And her father's trying to tell her, no, no, you're not. She's like, no, I am. And the mother's like, this isn't right, because according to the Catholic Church, he's your brother and you can't do this. And she's like, well, this is happening. And the father's like, you need to stop acting like a little girl and grow up. And she says, I am. So then she goes to the desk to tell them, they're checking out. And then the father passes out. Someone calls 911. When she goes over there, his eyes are closed, but it looks like he's praying. Now, I'm, sitting there wondering, is this real or is he doing this to try and manipulate her to come home? Like, I am really wondering because I feel like they've tried to do all these different things. We've gotten down to damn near the next week and she's still not budging. She's still holding fast to I am not leaving. And I don't know. I just feel like he's running game. I could be wrong, but I just feel like he's going to the last resort, which is sympathy. Which is pissed. That is fucked up. That is so fucked up if that's what he's doing. Everyone's at the hospital. Everyone, once they knew something was going on, all of Marcos's friends, they kicked in the gear to help. Alexander made a call to like a world-renowned heart surgeon that's in the DC area. The doctor came in and the specialist came in and talked with the family. Just everyone, just however they could help. If it was sending encouraging words, however they could help, they were there for him. Again, I'm like, it may be a little strange to me, the whole setup, but they seem to be ones who are in that lifestyle, seem to be a really close-knit family. And I can only appreciate that. I think that is absolutely awesome because that's what you need when you're going through stuff like that. Like, you need, family there. And when I say family, it doesn't have to be blood. It could be friends, but they treat you as family. So I guess he won. I guess he really was. I guess he really was sick. I thought he was lying. I really did. So Jose wanted to talk with Marcos and they walked outside. Jose is like, my mom has a problem with it because of the fact that with the old school conservatives, if you marry someone, even if they died, their brother is still, your brother-in-law is still your brother. That doesn't change because of death. New school Catholics, it's different. They don't view it the same way, which is what Marco says. But he's like, his mom is old school conservative Catholic. So she, of course, is worried about Isabella's soul. Okay. So he also tells him, listen, Poppy will come around. He just has to know that she's going to be okay, that she's going to be taken care of. That's the concern. And he gets that, he does understand that. So he kind of let him know, Jose did, that he knows, I know you're part of some group, and I know what my sister's kind of into, and if that works for you all, that works for you. You know, it is what it is. He was appreciative of the fact that they were able to help. Look, I mean, bringing in like a world-renowned heart surgeon, like everyone can't do that, right? So he's thankful for it, for sure. So she is gonna leave with Marcos, and she tells her mom, "I'm going. I'll see you tomorrow." Her mother, of course, was looking all crazy, but it is what it is. So she gets in the car with her man and she leaves. So then they get to the house, and she was gonna go make some coffee. Marcos gets a call from Jose, and he's like, "Listen, we're going to church tomorrow. I think it's called Lady or something." And he's like, "If you want to earn some brownie points, you guys need to show up tomorrow." And he's like, "Okay, cool. No problem." He hears a thud outside. He hangs up the phone, goes outside. It is Isabella with a knife stabbing at the ground, trying to pull up tumbleweeds. She looks a little possessed. She looks crazy. So he tries to stop her. It's super difficult. He pretty much had to pick her up and get her from out of there. And what did he do? She was saying stuff like she's going to be alone again and all this type of stuff. And, she's still dealing with Jorge. So these these issues are going to happen. And so she's reflecting on the fact of how, the different relapses that she went through with Jorge, right? And then getting involved in the extreme sports, like the different addictions he's had and how she kept losing him. So it's this cycle. And he kind of took her, and she's all in the dirt, but I don't know, when she had been in the dirt, but he goes and puts her on the bed. I'm like, why are you putting her on the bed and she dirty? Like, what's the purpose of that? You couldn't calm her fucking down on the floor? Like, why you gotta fuck up your sheets? I don't I'm just saying. I was like, what is the purpose of this? So then we switch back to her POV, and she was in a fog. And as she started to have an orgasm, because we started to play with her because they started fucking, it kind of cleared her mind a little bit. And I was just kind of like, again, you all have these fucking issues. You don't fully deal with them. I do think she's at least trying to face them, but still, it's just so much. Oh my gosh. And it's like you're trying to make up time for not being with the person you wanted to be with, but then you're trying to get over the person that you were with. It's just too fucking much. Next morning, he made her an omelet. She ate the whole thing. Because she had remember I had stated earlier she had lost some weight, and he very much wanted her to put that weight back on. So he starts telling her there's going to be a board in the kitchen that's going to have a list of all the things that she needs to do. And So, like, making the bed, tending to the garden. And he wants her to wear a pencil skirt when she does it so he can see her ass. And I'm like, bitch, fuck that. Like, that doesn't sound fun, her doing her garden work. That's what I mean by, that's why for me it doesn't work, because it seems very one-sided. And to them it may not, but I guess it's always easier to look when you're looking at it. You can see things that maybe you can't see when you're in it, right? Looking out. But it just seems like, how much she loves gardening and doing those type of things. Why wouldn't you want her to be comfortable? Right? Why does she have to turn something that she loves into a pleasure for you that's going to make her uncomfortable? I just don't understand that. That's the part that throws me. Why can't you love her to an extent? You claim to love her so much. Why the fuck you can't love her so she can have that to herself? Now, you've already established when you want her naked when, you two come in the house together, like, that you want her naked and different stuff, but her fucking thing is gardening. Let her fucking have that. Like, why are you like trying to like infringe on that shit? I don't know. That irked me a little bit. But again, I don't, that lifestyle wouldn't work for me. But that's how I just kind of see it. Like, all she has to worry about are your needs. Like, all she has to do is please you. That's it. And then maybe you'll make her come. That's kind of the way it comes across. I don't know. I just think that's shitty. But anyway, he did tell her he also wanted her to start, that garden initiative that she had started back in Miami, the nonprofit thing with the children here with the parks and stuff like that. And that gave her a thrill. And I was like, okay, well, that's nice. But the reason she likes this stuff, she needs structure. So apparently she's not able to do structure on her own. So she needs someone to provide it for her. And that gives her a thrill. Again, it's not for me I don't understand that. But for her, that's a need. And so that's the reason their dominant, submissive relationship works for her. And when she doesn't have it, she's completely off kilter. So that would be why. So they do the whole punishment thing again, and she gets turned on by that, and that was the end of that. Then they go and she puts on the pencil skirt and they go to church together. The father has blood clots in his lungs, and so they can't discharge him to fly. He has to stay within a couple of miles of the hospital. So he's going to be staying at Isabella's house. And then she's going to go spend every day with her family. And he added something to her list, which was make peace. And so it's been about 6 days. And she loves the structure. She's trying to make peace, but her mother is just not warming up to Marcos. But Marcos really doesn't stay around for for anything to change either. They went to church that time and that was kind of it. But he feels like he's giving them their space to work out whatever they need to work out. So finally today, the mother kind of talks to her and says basically, they knew from the beginning that Marcos was in love with her, but her mother also wants her to promise that I don't want you to go through this blindly like you did before. Um, she says he's very much angry with Jorge, his brother, and hurt men eventually will hurt you. And so the mother's not wrong. I'm not even gonna knock it, because there's always gonna be this huge elephant in the room, and if you all aren't talking about it and you're not dealing with it, this is going to be a problem. The repercussions are gonna come. So I mean, shout out to the mom, because she was right. She's not lying. Yeah, it's gonna happen with him. And so, but she, she's kind of like whenever she tries to broach the subject of Jorge, Marcos just kind of he shuts down, and she just assumed he was being stubborn, but the mother was like, "No, that's something else," like yeah, he's being stubborn, but that's also a part of something else going on too. And so the mother kind of noticed like her neighbors don't really come by. And she says, well, when you've had to call the cops over 12 times, people don't want to see the show anymore. And I think she's not wrong. When the story, when there keeps being a problem, at some point, it's probably going to result in death, right? So at some point, people don't want to see that shit. They're like, no, just let them be. They have their issues and just let them be. They'll be nosy for a little bit. But if it keeps continuing, it's just a problem at that point, and then people don't want to deal with it. Her mother also told her, do not go through this blindly. You did that with Jorge. You know, you don't like to deal with things, and you need to fully look at your situation. And so I guess with Jorge, her family saw the bullshit, right? And you keep running back to your family, running back to your family. So they keep seeing you getting hurt. They're your family. That shit bothers them to keep watching you walk into this destructive situation. It bothers your family. And so, being that they see there's an issue going on and it's not being dealt with, they don't want to watch you go through this shit again. So her mother is giving her extremely good advice. You know, open your eyes. Look at shit for what it is. Look at what's happening and you figure out a way to fix it. Because if not, you're just gonna get hurt again. And the girl done dealt with enough. Jesus. I mean, that she's dealt with a lot. So shout out to the mom. I thought she was just being kind of stank at first, or maybe holding on to some tradition. Don't get it twisted. I do think it's a little weird that you around here the whole time you were in love with your brother-in-law. I think that's fucking weird, but it is what it is. So Marcos comes to get her, and he's got a garment bag with a suit, and she's like, "What are we doing?" And he's like, "We are going to a event," and she was super happy about that. So Isabella is at Ascendo. She's getting ready for the evening. Marcos told her she could pick out whatever she wanted. He comes in, and then later on Charlotte comes in, and she doesn't feel a lot of that jealousy for Charlotte anymore. It's she kind of, when she saw the fire show, yes, it kind of made her think like, what the hell, you know what I mean? Because he's supposed to be my master, not yours. So, but I think when she kind of saw who and what Charlotte was, she could tell like, okay, it's not that type of relationship. And she had asked Charlotte like, which earrings do you prefer, like the smaller ones or the big ones? And Charlotte was like, you should do the small ones because you don't need anything to compete with your eyes. You have beautiful eyes. And at that moment, she really did feel something motherly towards Charlotte. And so, like I said, Marcos felt a fatherly protective thing with her. I mean, I hear you, but if you've been her master and you've been having her do some sexual shit, that's a little twisted. But anyway, I digress. And the poor Charlotte girl, I meant to mention this, like her parents basically threw her away when she was 5 years old. So she's always longed for stability. So I kind of get why she is drawn to this because it gives that structure, that whole thing. I kind of get why she's drawn to it. Makes sense. But Charlotte gives him a letter that she says a messenger stopped by and gave her. Marcos reads it and his face goes steel. And he leaves. We switch to Marcos POV. He goes to Alexander's office and he says, I guess in the note it basically said it's about time we talk about what you promised, and I'm going to speak with it was like Isabella's initials, And Alexander was like, yeah, kind of knew a little bit some about this. So basically, there's a guy named J.E. Whalen, and he owns, I'm sorry, no, he wants to own this piece of property that our boy Jorge had purchased. So Marcos is like, "What are you talking about? That's not possible. Jorge didn't have that kind of money, right?" And Alexander had to correct him and say, "No, he was very well off. He had started doing a lot of soul searching, and Jorge kind of found out that he was a submissive, which is why the relationship between him and Isabella fell apart. Also, that makes sense as to why he was into drugs, right? You're trying to cover something up. He wasn't being his true self. So, okay, this is starting to make sense. He, of course, is like, I don't want to know about my brother's sexual proclivities. Um, but he's also realizing there's a lot about your brother that you didn't know. And that's what Alexander was basically letting him know. He's like, he made some really great investments. Like, he kind of turned himself around. I was helping him. The fucking estate he left for Isabella is worth a bit, like damn near $1 billion. And so she's an extremely wealthy woman, doesn't even know it. And so Marcos was like, you know, a little worried about her because, listen, a lot of change is happening already. And to be hit with this amount of stuff, well, you got to think she doesn't want to have massive amounts of money. She's very, kind of simple. So it could be a heck of a shock factor for someone like her. It'll be a shock factor for anybody, but it'll have a different effect on someone like her. So that does concern him. However, he is now like, well, I'm going down to Baltimore to talk to the Whalen guy. He's like, because him talking about getting next to Isabella, that's not gonna cut it for me. And so we find out he's into trafficking. So he's into a lot of shit. So him sending that note clearly was a threat. And Alexander was also trying to let him know, like, you gotta your brother always felt inferior to you. He never measured up to you. So it looks like he had a lot of issues just trying to probably discover himself, figuring out, and you keep relapsing and stuff like that. There's just so many layers to what he had going on. That's a lot. And then you think about someone who's in a relationship with somebody like that, too much. They go to the event. She can tell the whole time Marcus is anxious, like something's up. She knows it. She winds up going off with the girls, and Derek talks to Marcos and lets him know that he spoke with the Whalen man, and basically the guy wants Isabella. And it sounds like he wants her for his trafficking business. So I'm just like, oh shit. So of course he is bubbling with anger. Alexander comes over and tells him, well, Whalen's here tonight, points him out, and he's like, you can't kill him right now, like you can't do that here. And he's like, I'm not gonna do that here. But he's like, neither one of you guys are gonna tell me what to do. He said, because if I have to lock every person in here and interrogate them, I'll do it. Like, he just doesn't play when it comes to Isabella. So guess what? Looks over, sees what he perceives as European trash talking to Isabella, and that's Whalen. So then we switch to Isabella's POV. This guy comes up to her asking where's her husband. She lets him know that he died last spring. And he's like, oh, I didn't know. I heard you were back in town. I've been out of town and all this type of stuff. And we have some unfinished business and all this type of bullshit. And so then the way he's looking at her, she felt like some type of cattle. When they're assessing the value, that's what he was doing. And Mark Ghost comes over and grabs her. And he, of course, is like, basically, you need to talk to me. not to her. And the guy, of course, is like, oh, so you're Marco Sandoval. He's like, seems I gave the note to the wrong brother. He's like, oh no, you gave it to the right brother, because when it concerns Isabella, it concerns me. Isabella gets taken away by Alexander, and then Marcos and Waylon have a conversation out on the terrace. And so, of course, he's got goons with him, you know, and he's lying. He's saying that there was a sale, but it just never got completed because he had to leave out of the country. And he says, but now that I've seen her, I want her too. And that did it. Marco was gone. That's all it took. So then when the goons come out of the dark, they Waylon tells them, just rough him up a little bit, don't kill him. But they don't have any idea who the fuck this man is. He didn't do his homework, which is kind of like, why would you ever approach anything and not do your homework? Like, you should have fucking known that this man was dead. You know, you should have known who the family is. Like, no one does recon anymore. Like, what the hell? So, of course, he beat their ass. I think one of them may have gotten one punch on him. That's about it. Other than that, he fucked them up. Bad. And then he told them, tell your boss he'll be number 67 that I put in the ground. He walks away. He's a little bloody, you know. It's their blood, not his. He's a little roughed up. He walks back in. And then we switch back to Isabella's POV. She's panicking because she doesn't know if Marcos is okay. Alexander kind of starts to tell her about Jorge and how he had come to him before his last trip, and that he was afraid that Waylon, you know, was going to try and do something. And he also told her, you know, your holdings are a lot more vast than what you thought. She knew they were well off. The last year he was sober, he did like really well financially. But the way that Alexander stated it, it sounded like it was something like much bigger. But at that point, all she wanted to see was Marcos. Like, she wanted to make sure he was okay. So she turns around and runs right into him. And the first thing she says is, you're bleeding. So they leave. They get in the limo. He tells the driver to go to Ascendos. And so they say, like, the security at that place is like, it rivals that of the CIA in Langley. So, you know, that's probably one of the safest places in the world for them to be. So they're all charged up. And so he winds up eating her pussy, and they fuck and have a great intense time. And she said, when she talked, she was saying to him like, Marco, she's like, you know, you're my master. So the next day she goes and gets all the information. Oh, and let me back up just a little bit. You notice her response when he says vast holdings? Her response wasn't, what do you mean? Her response was, where's Marcos? So she clearly, she's not into it like that. It doesn't move her that way. She's just different. Okay, so then we're back, and Alexander's telling her that she's a billionaire. And she don't want to deal with it, really. She knows she has to, but we find out she been getting mail and stuff, but she wouldn't even look at it before he died. And then after he died, she really didn't want to deal with shit. And she does realize she has kept her head in the sand with not handling anything. And she's realizing that's not good. And she's realizing that what her mother told her is she got to stop doing that stupid shit. Because things are happening around you and you don't know about them because you don't want to deal with them. Because you keep trying to retreat into yourself. So don't get it twisted. I do understand that some people, for safety measures and your mental, you may not want to deal with certain things. And, you know, you like, I don't want to deal with that. But you can't do that with every fucking thing. And she appears to have done that with everything until it became like it's a real fucking problem. So, again, I'm glad that she at least now sees this is an issue. I need to fix this shit. And then she takes the active measures to do so. She tells Alexander she wants to get this Grace initiative going. Um, if he could get, some funds together, sell some things so she can do that. He's like, that's fine, I'm on it. Marcos was so proud because she had already started on the business plan. And, you know, she was happy with it. It made her proud that, he was proud of her. But I'm like, girl, be proud of yourself too. Shit. You know? So then they go home. They wind up fucking on the couch. Um, he ate her pussy, then they fucked, and he was kind of filming it, and he had her blindfolded, which was kinky, and she was like, oh, wish I could see it myself. um so then he told her he's gonna take her to Ascendo's, like while he's talking to her, while they're fucking, he's talking to her, and he's like, he wants to blindfold her and do the fire thing and take her from behind, and he wants everyone to see what's his. So again, listen, it's about what you're into. So Isabella was taking a shower. Marcos gets a call. It's from Master R, who called about Charlotte. So Charlotte apparently got attacked. And they now have her in a room at Ascendo's. And he's like, what the hell is going on? Like, what the fuck are you into that she got hurt? So he's like, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Tells Isabella while they're on the way there what's going on. Charlotte is still terrified, and Master R wants answers now. So he starts to tell her a little bit about, I'm sorry, tell him a little bit about what's going on, and he's just kind of like, okay, but what the fuck this got to do with Charlotte? So I guess he must have done a little recon now, and he must have known that he was close to Charlotte, because thus the reason he had someone beat her up, right? And he knew that would affect Marcos. So I'm like, okay, now he's done his fucking homework. Well, it's game over now, right? Marcos is now ready to take out Waylon. Like, that's it. He's like, he's going to get him. He's going to Baltimore. So Alexander comes in, and they know they can't stop him. He had tried to give his resignation from the tribunal, I think is what it's called, and they just, child, it didn't work. He didn't. Alexander's like, he's not accepting that, So he comes in there and gets Isabella and says, "Come with me." So it's Jonathan, Derek, a couple other people too. So they're all part of the tribunal. She knew this existed, but these are supposed to be private meetings. She's never been to one. So she doesn't know everything about them. Um, she normally was just not going to ask any questions. Like, cool. So they kind of start discussing what they've already put in place. So more security is being put around her family at her home. They've got people on the ground at a private airport, which is right outside of Virginia and Southern Maryland. It's like outside of the restricted airspace. They've got a lot of stuff going on. So with them, when you're tied in, you're in, right? And they're a real community, and they're gonna do what needs to be done, and it clearly stretches wide, that place, that group. And so, being that this man Waylon wants property, she's like, I just want to sell it. I don't want it. And he said, well, if we do it the regular way, it's going to take months, but we can do it to where you can sell it to me. I will give you the market price for it, and then I'm going to give it for to where women, they can live there. It's like a shelter type of situation, and they can be in walking distance to their jobs, because he feels like they should be able to experience, like abused women and things like that. They should be able to experience, the most expensive real estate as well. And I was like, I like that. I like that. She, of course, is worried about Marcos, and they're like, Marcos can handle himself. They're like, he goes radio silent when he's on a mission, but he's good, you know? And Charlotte you got to think about it. He's got two things. He loves his Isabella, right? The man coming for her, that's a problem. And then they hurt Charlotte. Charlotte ain't got nothing to do with nothing. So, he going for vengeance. But Isabella annoyed me because she would keep calling him. And I'm like, why the fuck are you bothering him? She's worried about losing him. But I'm like, well, you're going to fuck some shit up if you keep calling his phone trying to distract him too, you psychopath. Like, why would you do that? I was like, that is the most dumbest thing for you to think of doing. I'm like, ugh. She annoyed me. She really, she really did. So Derek was like, let's go for a walk in the garden. He told her, again, he's good. You know, it may sound selfish how he has to do this, but this is how he has to do it in order to be effective. And then she felt childish for making the phone calls. I'm like, yeah, because you fucking should have, you know? Ugh. Well, anyway, she gets a phone call from her mom who's saying that they're out of coffee and stuff. And so Derek is like, okay, I'll take you. So the mother said there were some gardeners that showed up and they have men watching the house as well. So they're like, okay, great. So the gardeners were supposed to start because Marcos had hired them. So that's fine. So they're going to go and pick up some coffee and some other snacks and then they'll go to the house. So then we switch to Marcos. He's on his way to Baltimore and then he gets a call from Alexander. The guy that had apparent eyes on Waylon said that he was in Baltimore, but Alexander called and said Waylon and his men are at Isabella's house right now, and Derek took Isabella over there. He's like, we have eyes. I have people in place to go. But now, of course, Marcos is like, oh no, he's got to get back, right? Because I don't want to say he might have a hero complex. He probably does. But then it could just be because he loves Isabella so much. He doesn't trust it with anybody else. I don't know. But now he's rushing to get back to that house in Arlington. They get to the house. Waylon is sitting in there. Isabella and Derek are there. And Waylon is pretty much like, you're going to sign this property over to me. And he figured out Marcos's pet name for her because when he started naming the different things, he said the word Ella and she made a face and he goes, Ella. So that's what he calls you. And so he wanted her to get on the floor, get on her knees, and crawl to him to sign the papers. And he threatened, of course, to take her parents out if she didn't. So he was like, I'll send someone up. And he started sending a goon upstairs. And so she got on her knees, and sure enough, then she hears, get up. So she got up and went over to Marcos, and Waylon's men didn't even hear him come in, right? So Waylon figured out that he was possibly Black Ops since he couldn't find out anything about him. And so he says, I know you're Black Ops, but you can't outrun a bullet. But then there's a red laser light on his men, and they get terrified. And Derek told them, put your guns on the floor and kick them out. They did it. Waylon was acting like he wasn't affected by the red laser beam on him. But then when Marco said that you're making an enemy out of Alexander Rockingham, that scared the shit out of him. So I was like, okay, yeah, Alexander used some crazy power with that tribunal. And so he's like, I don't want any problems with Alexander. And then a bunch of people came in. The mom damn near hurt herself trying to, I think she was just trying to find out what was going on. But they swooped in. They got him. They're gonna make sure those charges for S trafficking sticks to him, and they are gonna make sure he's put away for good. Alexander was there as well. He was outside, and so when they walked out, well, no, when Marcos and Derek walked out, The only thing they saw was Alexander nod and he got in the car and he left. That was it. And Marcos was like, I just should have trusted Alex more than what I did. And Derek told him, like, Alexander didn't accept your resignation anyway, so he will be expecting you at the meeting next week. Her parents are finally going to go ahead and go back to Miami. The father's well enough to do so now. He has come around to Marcos. He wanted to make sure that they were coming home for Christmas and Easter. And he only thing he asked about with that situation, he said, did you take care of the bad men that were there for good? And he said yes. He said, then that's good enough for me. So we found out their last week in town they actually stayed at Marco's house. um they didn't want to stay at that other house, and after what happened, I can't disagree with that. um the dad, while they were in the garden, he had asked Marcos, are you with her for her money? He says, I have my own money. He's like, but you don't have as much money as she does. And he says, it's pretty close. So he was already a multimillionaire himself. So he's got plenty of money. So he's straight. So they leave and they have a whole little punishment section. I'm sorry, not section, session. Isabella and Marcos, for all the times he couldn't have her. So did the whole spanking with the ruler while he put a ginger root in her mouth, which burns. But again, it's just another form of pain, heightened, whatever. So it is what it is. He ate her pussy, fucked her, and then later that night, um, she woke up and Marcos wasn't in the bed. He was on the couch, and he had these little two army men. And he's like, "Where did you get these?" And she said, "Oh, it came from the safe deposit box. I didn't even know we had a safety deposit box. But when I went to the bank to close the accounts, they gave them to me, and there was a bunch of stuff in there. And there was something in there about the Wayland deal, kind of warning that this guy was going to be a problem, X, Y, and Z." So he was just kind of like looking at these two toy soldiers, and we find out that him and Jorge used to play with these army men when they were kids. And he went and threw it away, but it's just kind of like, just because you throw it away doesn't mean that stops anything. You still needs to, you got to deal with this. He's gone, but he's always going to be a presence, you know? Like, there's kind of really no way to get around that. So she can't go back to sleep, and she thinks about what her mother said to her. And so she goes out to the garden, and he comes out, and she had his shirt on, and she made the comment, it should have been you. I should have met you first. He, of course, was like, I wish that too. And we found out the reason that he was late was because he had saw a mother with her kids that were in need of help with changing their tire. And so he stopped to help them. And he almost wishes that he wouldn't have helped him. um, but I will say this, because this is kind of how I view it. You felt a pull towards Marcos, and it shouldn't have been a decision based upon I met him first, so I went over here. Him giving you massive amounts of attention to me was a sign, because I feel like no one can keep that shit up. That's why I feel like it's a ploy. I'm not saying that you can't give people attention. I'm not saying that. But when there's an over consuming amount of it, when someone is clearly love bombing you, this is what it sounds like he was doing. So that sounds good, but that shit cannot be kept up. And I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know. She made the decision. You know, you make your decisions, you got to live with them, and I get that. But did you know he was like missing for long periods of time? Like, it seems like you chose him off of that one situation. Like, were like, Marcos was still coming around and you still just chose fucking Jorge. I don't know. I just find it crazy. But anyway, she does say to him, I love you, but we're dealing with ghosts and you've got to let it go. She's like, you've got to forgive Jorge. She's like, or we're never going to be able to move forward. So Marcos winds up going to the gravesite because he couldn't go back to sleep. And he said some things that he needed to say. We find out, he'd always tried to save Jorge. And for the first time, the first time that Jorge overdosed, they had this real conversation. And it's like after that, they never really had a conversation as real as that after it. He kept trying to save his brother and he couldn't. And Isabella appeared and she kind of said he had to save himself. And she's like, I think maybe that's the reason he kind of got into drugs and extreme sports in his own way. He was going off doing dangerous stuff and trying to survive it. I think he was trying to measure up to what you were. It's not the same, but he was trying to do what you were doing. You were going off saving the world, but he was trying to overcome dangerous things too, so he could prove he was just. See, that's what happens when you fucked up. I mean, honestly, when you trying to prove yourself and measure yourself according to other people, it will fuck you up. This is a prime example of that shit. And then we also find out that when he would come around, he didn't hide his attraction for Isabella. So that means he was probably staring at Isabella, and Jorge saw the shit. So now that probably put even more pressure on him to try and keep her. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like, good grief. Just too damn much. So even though, Jorge was a screw up, I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but I just think if this is the person you've always tried to be like, and then you get the woman that you clearly see they want, you're always going to be terrified they're going to be able to get them because you feel like a fraud. And unfortunately, he succumbed to his addictions. It just wasn't the drugs. It wound up being extreme sports. So everything's not solved, but I think it did help him put a lot of things to rest that he hadn't thought about. Um, so I think it definitely helped him. You know, I think sometimes people want a deeper answer than what it is, and sometimes it's just a simple answer. It's not as deep as you think it is. You know. So we fast forward a little. She's got a Garden Grace's opening. She converted an old church that was abandoned into, the offices for the foundation. She hasn't even had to solicit money. They've been knocking down her door to work with her, and she knows Alexander had something to do with it, but he'll never admit it. He just says, "Don't listen to gossip." And then we find out her and Marcos are engaged. Her father retired about 3 months back. Jose is now running the family landscaping business. The father's still bossy. They're at the ceremony. He telling people what to do. I think he just can't help it. That's just who he is. The mom has warmed up to Marcos. She tells him, from now on, you come and pick us up from the airport. You don't send a limo. And he's like, okay, no problem. I will. And she tells him, you're a good man, Marcos. I always knew it. And so we also find out Charlotte, she comes up, and again, she doesn't feel any jealousy or anything like that towards Charlotte. Charlotte is actually engaged to Master M, and she hired her to work there with her. She's a really good person, and she wants to help her gain confidence back. And so, being the fact that, she's a submissive, she aims to please, she's an amazing worker. So that's great. Her seeing Marcos and her mother walking around together, because the mother's like, this is a church. We need to light a candle. And she had told her mom, I converted into offices. Her mother said, once it's a church, it's always a church. But it warmed her heart, and she knew that she could finally cross off that last thing on the list in the kitchen, which was make peace. And that is how it ends. questions. So, what did you all think? I really liked it. Some of the characters annoy me, but I'll always, it was still a good story to me. Um, it just was, I guess, people just not communicating, not dealing with their emotions, and you can see how that can prolong a lot of fucking pain, a lot of shit. But I liked it. Let me know what you guys thought. Drop down in the comment section and let me know. If you have any suggestions as well, please drop down in the comments with those. If you are in the market for a beautiful notebook or journal, I do have those available, and the links are going to be available down below in the description section. Make sure you like and subscribe and share. And as always, I truly do thank you all for your support, and thank you for tuning in to the Always Reading Book Club.